There is a quiet contradiction inside the human body. Among land animals, we are one of the few that think constantly about food, even when we are not starving, even when energy is already stored. Many animals can pass long stretches without eating, their bodies settling into stillness, conserving, waiting. But the human body rarely rests in that way. It returns again and again to a gentle signal, a low insistence that something is missing even when nothing is immediately wrong. This may not be a flaw, but a trace of something older that has not fully adapted to the world we live in now. If that is true, then why do humans get hungry more often than animals? Hunger often feels simple, as if it comes from the stomach being empty, but in the human body it begins somewhere quieter and deeper, inside the brain, where signals are constantly being measured and compared. The body is not waiting until it runs out of energy before it reacts. Instead, it watches for small changes, small drops, small patterns that suggest energy might soon be needed. This is why the feeling can arrive even when there is still food in the body, even when nothing urgent is happening. Long before modern life, when early humans moved across open land and forests without fixed meals, this early warning system helped them act before true weakness began, because waiting too long could mean missing rare chances to eat. The brain, especially areas that help control balance and survival, receives information from the blood about sugar levels, from the gut about fullness, and from stored energy in fat. These signals are turned into a feeling that is not sharp or painful at first, but steady and noticeable, a quiet pull toward food. In other animals, similar systems exist, but many species allow these signals to stay silent longer, only rising when energy becomes truly low. The human body, by contrast, tends to speak earlier, and more often not because it is weaker, but because it is tuned to act before danger appears. This tuning is linked to how the human body uses energy. Even at rest, the brain continues to work, maintaining memory, attention, and awareness. Compared to many animals of similar size, humans devote a larger share of daily energy to the brain. This does not mean the body is always close to running out, but it does mean the system that monitors energy is always active, always adjusting. In early human environments, where food could not be stored easily and might not appear for long periods, this constant awareness helped guide movement and decision without needing to wait for extreme hunger. It shaped behavior gently, encouraging searching, gathering, and attention to the environment. Over time, this pattern became part of how the body expects the world to work. In modern settings, where food is often nearby, the same system continues to send signals based on patterns rather than real shortage. The body does not fully distinguish between a world where food is rare and one where it is constant. It reacts to timing, habit, and small changes in internal balance. This is why hunger can return soon after eating, not because the previous meal failed, but because the brain has learned rhythms and continues to follow them. The stomach itself plays a role, stretching when food enters and sending signals back to the brain, but it is not the main source of hunger. Even with a full stomach, if the brain expects food at a certain time, or if energy signals shift slightly, the feeling can appear again. Early humans did not sit waiting for hunger to become severe. Their bodies guided them toward food long before that point, through these subtle signals. This created a pattern of frequent awareness rather than long silence. Many animals, especially those that feed in large amounts at once, have bodies that allow long gaps between meals without strong signals. Their systems are adapted to cycles of feast and rest. The human system leans toward frequent checking, frequent signaling, frequent readiness. This difference does not come from a single cause, but from a combination of brain activity, energy use, and the environments in which humans evolved. When we feel hunger today, it is not only a response to what is happening now, but also an echo of those earlier conditions, when acting early was safer than waiting too long, when noticing small changes in the body could guide survival in a world where food was uncertain and movement was constant. The feeling itself is calm, but persistent, not a sign of immediate danger, but a reminder that the body is always preparing, always watching, always slightly ahead of its own needs. The body continues to send signals even after food has been eaten, and this can seem confusing at first, as if something is not working correctly, but the system is not designed to wait for a perfect balance before it speaks. Instead, it moves in small waves, rising and falling based on many signals that do not always match each other at the same moment. Inside the body, several chemical messengers help shape the feeling of hunger and fullness. One of them rises when the stomach has been empty for a while and gently tells the brain that it may be time to eat. Others increase after food enters the gut and slowly tell the brain that energy is coming in. These signals do not turn on and off like a switch. They overlap, fade, and return, creating a rhythm rather than a single clear state. In early human environments, this rhythm allowed flexibility. Food was not predictable, so the body did not wait for a single strong signal. It kept the person slightly aware, slightly ready, so that when food appeared, the body was already prepared to act. This is different from many animals that rely on more distinct cycles, where long periods of low signaling are followed by strong feeding responses. The human system favors continuity instead of long silence. Another important detail is that the body does not measure energy in a simple way. It does not count total stored energy and then decide when to feel hunger. Instead, it pays close attention to how quickly energy is being used and how quickly it is being replaced. A small drop in available energy, even if total reserves are still large, can be enough to create a gentle signal. This makes sense in the context of early human life, where energy had to support constant movement, awareness, and decision-making. Waiting until reserves were very low would have reduced the ability to search for food or respond to changes in the environment. The body therefore learned to respond early, when action was still easy. This early response can feel like frequent hunger in modern life, where food is always close and movement is often limited. The system continues to follow patterns that once matched a very different world. There is also a role for memory and learning in this process. The brain remembers when food usually appears and begins to prepare in advance. This preparation includes small changes in hormone levels, attention, and even saliva. These changes can create a feeling that resembles hunger, even if the body does not urgently need energy at that moment. Over time, these learned patterns become strong. Eating at the same times each day teaches the body to expect food at those times, and the signals begin to rise before the meal arrives. In early human groups, this kind of learning was linked to environmental patterns such as daylight, movement, and the success of foraging. It was not fixed to a clock, but it still created expectations. The modern habit of fixed meals strengthens this effect, making hunger feel more frequent and more predictable. The stomach itself contributes by expanding and contracting, sending signals through nerves that connect directly to the brain. When it is empty, it can create gentle waves of sensation that the brain interprets as hunger. When it is full, it stretches and sends calming signals. But these physical signals are only one part of a larger system. Even when the stomach is not fully empty, the brain can still produce a sense of hunger if other signals suggest that energy may soon be needed. This layered system reflects a long history in which the human body had to balance uncertainty with readiness. It could not depend on clear, simple signals, because the environment did not provide clear, simple patterns. Instead, it developed a system that stays active, that checks often, that leans slightly toward action rather than waiting. This is why hunger can feel like a constant background presence rather than a rare event. It is not only about lack, but about preparation, shaped over many generations when early humans moved through landscapes where food could appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly, and where the cost of waiting too long could not be easily reversed. Even when the body has enough stored energy, the feeling of hunger can still return, and this is often where the experience becomes difficult to understand, because it seems to contradict the idea that hunger is only about shortage. In reality, the human body does not rely on a single measure of how much energy is stored. It relies on many small signals that reflect how energy is moving in the present moment. If energy in the blood begins to drop slightly, even within a normal range, the brain can respond by increasing the sense of hunger. This response is not a sign of failure, but a sign of sensitivity. It shows that the body is designed to notice small changes early, rather than waiting for large problems to appear. In early human environments, this sensitivity allowed people to act while they were still strong, while they could still walk, search, and make decisions clearly. It reduced the risk of reaching a state where action would become slow or uncertain. The body was not trying to be comfortable. It was trying to stay ahead of risk. Over long periods of time, this pattern became stable. The brain learned to treat small drops in available energy as meaningful, even when total reserves were still present in fat stores. Those reserves are not always quickly accessible, and using them requires changes in the body that take time. The brain therefore prefers to keep a steady flow of energy from recent food, rather than relying heavily on stored energy. This preference creates a system where hunger can appear before any real danger exists. In contrast, many animals are better adapted to shift into states where stored energy becomes the main source for longer periods. Their bodies can reduce activity, lower energy use, and rely on internal reserves more smoothly. Humans can do this as well, but not with the same ease or in the same conditions. The human body is built to remain active and aware, and this requires a steady supply of energy that is quickly available. Another layer comes from attention itself. Humans do not only feel hunger through internal signals, they also notice it, think about it, and sometimes amplify it. The brain can bring the feeling into awareness more often, especially in environments where food is visible or easy to imagine. This ability is connected to memory and planning, which are strong in humans compared to many other animals. In early human life, remembering where food was found or thinking about the next opportunity to eat could improve survival. The mind would return to food as an important topic, not because of constant need, but because of its importance. This habit remains today, even though the environment has changed. Seeing food, thinking about it, or expecting it can make the feeling of hunger more noticeable. This does not mean the hunger is false. It means the system includes both body and mind working together. The stomach, the blood, the brain, and memory all contribute to the final experience. When these signals align, hunger feels clear and strong. When they do not fully align, hunger can feel lighter but still present, like a quiet reminder rather than a strong demand. This layered design reflects a long history in which early humans had to respond to uncertain conditions with flexibility. The body did not wait for clear signals because the world did not provide clear guarantees. Instead, it created a continuous conversation between different systems, each adding a small part to the overall feeling. In modern life, where food is stable and often abundant, this same system can feel excessive, as if it is asking for more than is needed. But from a longer view, it is not excessive. It is consistent with a design that values early awareness, steady readiness, and the ability to act before conditions become difficult. Hunger, in this sense, is not only about the present moment. It is shaped by a past in which acting a little too early was safer than acting too late, and where the cost of missing an opportunity to eat could not be easily recovered once it passed. When we look at the human body in a quiet, resting state, it may seem calm and still, but inside, one organ continues to work without pause, using a steady flow of energy that does not slow down in the same way as many other systems. The brain, even when the body is not moving, continues to process information, maintain awareness, and support basic functions that keep a person ready to respond. This constant activity requires energy, and compared to many animals of similar body size, the human brain uses a larger share of the body's available energy each day. This is a well-established observation in biology, and it helps explain why the human body pays close attention to energy balance even during periods of rest. The brain does not store energy in a large way. It depends on a continuous supply from the blood, especially in the form of glucose, which must be kept within a stable range. Because of this, the body monitors small changes carefully. When levels begin to fall, even slightly, signals are sent that can increase the feeling of hunger. This does not mean the body is in danger, but it reflects the need to keep the brain supplied without interruption. In early human environments, this constant demand would have shaped behavior over time. Humans did not simply wait until they were weak to look for food. Their bodies encouraged them to respond earlier, while they were still able to move, think, and make decisions effectively. This early response reduced risk in environments where food was not guaranteed. The relationship between the brain and energy also explains why the human body does not easily shift into long periods of low intake without noticeable signals. While humans can adapt to lower food availability for a time, the brain continues to require a steady supply, and the body continues to monitor this closely. In contrast, many animals have brains that use less energy relative to their body size, or they have metabolic systems that can slow down more significantly when food is scarce. Some species can enter states where overall energy use decreases, allowing them to wait longer between meals without strong internal signals. The human body is less flexible in this specific way, not because it lacks adaptation, but because it maintains a high level of continuous brain activity. This difference becomes more noticeable when comparing patterns of feeding. Animals that consume large amounts of food at once can rely on slower digestion and lower ongoing energy demands, allowing them to remain without food for longer periods. Humans, however, tend to rely on more frequent intake to maintain a steady supply of usable energy. This pattern does not require large meals to the same extent, but it does create a rhythm of more frequent hunger signals. In early human history, this would have aligned with a lifestyle that involved constant movement, searching, and interaction with the environment. The body was not designed for long stretches of inactivity followed by rare feeding. It was designed for ongoing engagement, supported by a steady flow of energy. Even today, when a person is sitting quietly, the brain continues to consume energy at a stable rate. This means that the system responsible for detecting changes in energy remains active, and small fluctuations can still lead to the experience of hunger. The body is not waiting for extreme depletion. It is responding to ongoing demand. This helps explain why hunger can appear even when physical activity is low. The need is not coming only from the muscles or from visible effort. It is coming from a deeper requirement to keep the brain functioning smoothly. In the long history of human development, this constant demand likely shaped how early humans interacted with their surroundings. They would have needed to maintain attention, memory, and awareness while navigating complex environments, and this required a reliable energy supply. The signals that encourage eating more often can be understood as part of this system, helping to maintain stability rather than responding only to crisis. In this way, the human experience of hunger is closely tied to the way the brain uses energy, and to a long pattern of living in conditions where staying slightly ahead of need was more effective than waiting for clear signs of shortage. The steady demand of the brain for energy becomes easier to understand when we consider how it receives and uses that energy from moment to moment, because unlike many other tissues in the body, it depends on a continuous flow rather than large stored reserves. The brain draws much of its immediate fuel from glucose circulating in the blood, and while the body can store energy in fat and in limited amounts as glycogen, these stores are not used in exactly the same way or at the same speed. Glycogen stored in the liver can help maintain blood glucose for a period of time, but it is not a long-lasting reserve. Fat stores hold a large amount of energy, but turning that energy into a form the brain can use involves changes in metabolism that take time and are influenced by many conditions. Because of this, the body tends to protect a steady level of glucose in the blood, and it monitors even small shifts with care. When glucose begins to fall within the normal range, the body can respond by increasing signals that lead to hunger, encouraging food intake before levels drop further. This process is widely observed and reflects a system designed to maintain stability rather than react only to extremes. In early human environments, this would have been important because the ability to think clearly, remember locations, and respond to the surroundings depended on a stable supply of energy to the brain. Waiting until energy was very low would have reduced the ability to act effectively, especially in situations that required attention and coordination. The body therefore learned to respond earlier, using subtle signals to guide behavior. This pattern differs from many animals that can rely more heavily on internal energy stores for longer periods without frequent signaling. Some animals can shift more smoothly into using stored fat as their primary fuel, reducing the need for immediate food intake and allowing longer gaps between meals. Humans can also use fat as a source of energy, especially during longer periods without food, but the transition is gradual, and the body often continues to signal hunger during this shift. This does not mean the system is inefficient. It reflects a balance between flexibility and the need to support constant brain function. The human body tends to favor a steady supply of readily available energy, even if total stored energy is still sufficient. Another factor is that the brain does not simply respond to current levels of energy, but also to patterns and expectations. If energy has been supplied regularly, the body may begin to anticipate future needs and prepare in advance. This preparation can include changes in hormone levels that increase appetite before any measurable shortage occurs. In early human life, Where access to food was uncertain, this anticipation could support survival by encouraging action at the right time, rather than waiting for a clear deficit. It allowed early humans to remain active and responsive in environments where timing could matter. In modern settings, where food is more predictable, this same anticipatory system can make hunger feel more frequent. The body continues to follow patterns that once matched a different environment, and it does not fully adjust to constant availability. The result is a system that remains sensitive, that checks often, and that encourages regular intake even when energy reserves are not low. The muscles and other organs also contribute to overall energy use, but their demand can change with activity. The brain, however, maintains a relatively constant level of consumption, which means that the system responsible for maintaining energy balance is always engaged. This ongoing demand helps explain why hunger can feel like a regular part of daily experience rather than a rare signal of true shortage. From a longer perspective, this pattern reflects the conditions under which the human body developed, where maintaining a steady flow of energy supported movement, awareness, and decision-making in environments that required constant attention. The signals that lead to more frequent hunger are part of this broader system, shaped by the need to keep the brain supplied and the body ready, even in situations where waiting for clear signs of depletion would have carried greater risk. The constant energy demand of the brain does not only influence how often hunger appears, but also how the body organizes its entire system around keeping that demand stable. And this organization can be seen in the way the body resists sudden changes rather than allowing large swings. The human body tends to maintain balance within a narrow range, especially for things like blood glucose, because even small disruptions can affect how the brain functions. This process, often described in biology as maintaining internal stability, involves many organs working together, including the liver, pancreas, and nervous system. When energy from food enters the body, it is not simply used all at once. It is distributed, stored, and released in controlled ways so that the brain receives a steady supply. When food is not entering the system, the body begins to release stored energy, but it does so gradually, trying to avoid sharp drops. During this time, signals related to hunger can increase, not because the body is failing, but because it is actively managing the situation and encouraging a return to intake before balance becomes harder to maintain. In early human environments, this approach would have supported consistent mental function across changing conditions. Early humans needed to stay aware of their surroundings, remember locations, recognize patterns, and make decisions over long periods of movement. These activities depend on stable brain function, which in turn depends on stable energy availability. The body therefore developed a system that leans toward prevention rather than recovery. It prefers to act before imbalance becomes large. This preference can be felt as more frequent hunger signals, especially when compared to animals that allow greater variation in their internal state. Many animals can tolerate wider swings in energy availability without immediate behavioral response. They may reduce activity, enter resting states, or rely on stored energy for longer stretches without strong signals to eat. The human body is less inclined to reduce awareness in this way. It maintains a relatively constant level of mental activity, and this requires ongoing support. Another detail is that the brain is not only using energy, but also influencing how the rest of the body behaves in response to energy signals. It can adjust attention, motivation, and even how rewarding food feels. When energy signals begin to shift, the brain can increase the importance of food-related cues, making them more noticeable. This does not necessarily mean the body is in urgent need, but it reflects a system designed to guide behavior gently and continuously. In early human life, this would have helped direct attention toward food sources at the right time, without requiring extreme hunger to trigger action. The result is a system where the feeling of hunger is not a single clear event, but part of an ongoing process that connects internal balance with behavior. In modern environments, where food is readily available and often visible, this same system can feel more active than necessary. The body continues to operate with the same sensitivity, even though the conditions have changed. It still aims to keep energy stable, still responds to small shifts, and still encourages regular intake. This can create the impression that humans become hungry more often than animals, but from a biological perspective, it reflects a difference in how the system is designed to maintain function. The human body prioritizes steady brain activity and early response to change, while many animals rely more on cycles that include longer periods of low intake. These differences are not about one system being better than another. They reflect different ways of adapting to different patterns of life. For humans, the need to maintain continuous awareness, memory, and decision-making likely shaped a system that favors stability and early signaling. Hunger, in this context, becomes a regular signal within that system, a gentle but persistent reminder that the body is working to keep itself balanced, not only in the present moment, but in a way that has been shaped by long periods of human existence in environments where staying slightly ahead of need supported survival more reliably than waiting for clear signs of shortage. In many animals, there is a clear ability to slow down when food becomes scarce, a quiet shift in the body that reduces energy use and allows them to wait without strong signals pushing them to eat. This shift can involve lowering movement, reducing internal activity, and relying more fully on stored energy. The body enters a state that conserves resources, making it possible to pass long periods without feeding. In humans, this kind of deep energy-saving state is less pronounced in everyday conditions. While the human body can adjust to lower food intake, it does not easily move into a mode where both physical and mental activity are reduced to the same degree as seen in many other species. One reason is that the human brain continues to demand a steady supply of energy, and the body is organized to support that demand even when food is not immediately available. Instead of shutting down non-essential processes, the human system often maintains a level of alertness and readiness that keeps energy use relatively stable. This means that signals related to hunger can appear sooner because the body is not fully reducing its needs. In early human environments, this pattern would have been closely linked to the way humans survived. Early humans depended on movement, observation, and cooperation. Finding food required attention to detail, awareness of the environment, and the ability to respond quickly. Reducing these abilities too much in response to short-term scarcity would have made it harder to locate food when it became available. The body therefore balanced conservation with continued function, allowing some adjustments but avoiding deep reductions that would limit awareness. This is different from animals that can afford to become inactive for long periods, either because they have different ecological roles or because their environments allow for such strategies. The human approach is more continuous, maintaining activity even under changing conditions. This continuity has a cost, which is the need for more frequent input of energy. The body does not stretch long periods without food as easily, because it is not fully reducing its demands during those periods. Another aspect is that the human body is less specialized for extreme fasting conditions. Some animals have adaptations that allow them to store large amounts of energy, and then rely on those stores with minimal loss of function. Humans do store energy in fat, but the system that uses this energy is more gradual and does not fully replace the need for regular intake in the same way. The transition from using recently eaten energy to relying more on stored energy involves changes that the body manages carefully, and during this time, hunger signals often remain present. This reflects a system that is cautious, that prefers to maintain a steady flow rather than shift abruptly into a different mode. In early human life, this caution would have supported a pattern of frequent searching and gathering rather than long periods of waiting. It encouraged consistent interaction with the environment, where small amounts of food could be found and used regularly. The structure of early human groups, which often involved shared effort and movement across landscapes, also supported this pattern. Energy was not only needed for the individual, but for maintaining social and cooperative behaviors that helped groups survive. Reducing activity too much would have affected these interactions. As a result, the human body developed a way of managing energy that favors ongoing function rather than deep conservation. In modern life, where food is more stable and activity levels are often lower, this same system can feel mismatched to the environment. The body continues to expect regular input, continues to signal hunger based on small changes, and does not fully shift into a low-demand state in response to short-term lack of food. This can create the impression that humans become hungry more often than animals, but it reflects a different balance between conservation and activity. The human body maintains a level of readiness that was shaped over long periods when staying active and aware increased the chances of finding food, and where waiting too long, even in a conserving state, could reduce those chances in ways that were difficult to recover from. When food becomes limited, the human body does begin to adjust, but the way it adjusts is gradual and controlled rather than immediate and deep. Metabolic rate can decrease slightly, movement may become more economical, and the body can begin to rely more on stored energy. These changes are well documented in physiology, and they show that humans do have mechanisms for coping with reduced intake. However, these mechanisms do not usually lead to a state where the body becomes quiet in the same way seen in many animals that can remain inactive for long periods without strong internal signals. The human system tends to keep multiple processes active at once, especially those related to brain function, circulation, and basic maintenance. This creates a situation where energy use is reduced only to a certain extent, and the body continues to monitor incoming energy closely. As a result, hunger signals often remain present, even as the body is already adapting to lower intake. This pattern reflects a balance rather than a full shift into conservation. In early human environments, this balance would have been important because reducing activity too much could limit the ability to search for food, follow animal tracks, gather plants, or move with a group. Humans depended on continuous interaction with their surroundings, and this required maintaining a level of function even during periods of scarcity. The body therefore adjusted in a way that preserved capability rather than minimizing all energy use. This approach differs from animals that can safely reduce movement and weight, sometimes for extended periods, until conditions improve. Those animals often have ecological roles or physiological adaptations that support such waiting. Humans, by contrast, developed in contexts where waiting without action could reduce the chance of finding food at all. Another factor is how the human body transitions between different sources of energy. After eating, the body uses glucose from the blood and stores some energy for later use. When food is not available, it begins to draw on stored glycogen and then increasingly on fat. This shift is a normal and widely accepted part of human metabolism. However, the transition is not instant, and during this period the body continues to send signals that encourage food intake. The presence of these signals does not mean that the body cannot function without food, but it shows that the system prefers to maintain a steady supply rather than rely fully on stored reserves. In many animals that are adapted to longer fasting periods, this transition can occur more smoothly, with less noticeable signaling. The human experience tends to include more awareness of the shift, which can be felt as continued hunger. Hormones that regulate appetite also respond to these changes. When food intake decreases, signals that promote hunger can increase, while signals associated with fullness may decrease. This response helps guide behavior toward finding food, rather than allowing the body to remain in a low-intake state without action. In early human life, this would have supported consistent effort to locate food sources, even when recent intake was low. It encouraged movement and attention rather than prolonged inactivity. The result is a system that remains active, that adjusts gradually, and that continues to communicate the need for energy even while adapting internally. In modern environments where food can be obtained with little effort, this same system can feel persistent. The body continues to signal based on patterns that were shaped in a different context, and it does not fully silence those signals simply because food is available. The feeling of hunger, therefore, is not only about immediate need, but also about the way the body manages change over time. It reflects a system that prioritizes maintaining function and readiness, using gradual adjustments rather than deep conservation, and encouraging regular intake to support a level of activity that has been central to human survival across many generations. Even when the body is already adjusting to lower food intake, there is another layer that keeps the sense of hunger present, and that layer is the way the human system links energy use with behavior rather than separating them. In many animals that can remain without food for long periods, behavior often changes first. Movement slows, attention narrows, and the body settles into a state that reduces the need to act. Energy conservation is closely tied to doing less. In humans, this connection is weaker. The body does not easily reduce awareness or engagement to the same degree, and this keeps behavior active even when energy intake is reduced. The result is that hunger remains part of the experience, not only as a signal of energy balance, but as a guide for continued action. This pattern can be seen in how humans respond to short-term food restriction. Instead of becoming still, people often continue to think, move, and interact with their surroundings, and the brain continues to process information at a relatively stable level. This ongoing activity requires support, and the body responds by maintaining signals that encourage eating. The signals are not only about physical need, they're also about maintaining a connection between internal state and external behavior. In early human environments, this connection would have been important because survival depended on continuing to search, observe, and respond, even when food was not immediately available. The body could not rely on long periods of inactivity, because opportunities to find food could appear at any time and often required quick response. By keeping hunger signals present, the body helped maintain a focus on food-related activity without forcing a complete shutdown of other functions. This created a system where awareness and need were linked, guiding behavior in a steady way. Another aspect is that the human body does not fully separate short-term and long-term energy management. While it can draw on stored energy, it still gives importance to immediate availability. This creates a situation where the body continues to signal hunger even when long-term reserves are sufficient. The signal is not only about how much energy exists in total, but about how easily that energy can be used at the present moment. In many animals that tolerate longer fasting, the shift toward using stored energy is more complete, and behavior adjusts to match that shift. In humans, the shift is partial, and behavior remains more active. This combination leads to a continued sense of hunger, even as the body is already adapting internally. Hormonal responses also support this pattern by reinforcing the link between energy status and behavior. Signals that increase appetite can rise during periods of reduced intake, encouraging continued effort to find food. At the same time, signals that promote energy conservation do not completely suppress activity or awareness. This balance reflects a system designed to keep the individual engaged with the environment rather than withdrawn from it. In early human groups, this would have supported cooperation and shared effort, as individuals needed to remain responsive to others and to changing conditions. The body therefore maintains a level of activity that supports interaction, even when energy is limited. In modern environments, where food is easy to access and physical effort is often reduced, this same system can feel persistent and sometimes unnecessary. The body continues to connect hunger with action, even when action is no longer required to obtain food. It continues to send signals based on small changes and learned patterns, keeping attention directed toward food more often than might seem needed. From a longer perspective, this reflects a system that was shaped to support continuous engagement rather than long withdrawal. The human body favors staying active, staying aware, and staying ready to respond, and hunger becomes part of that ongoing state, not only as a measure of need, but as a steady influence that helps guide behavior in a world that was once unpredictable and required constant attention to survive. Many animals are able to pass long periods without eating, not because they ignore hunger, but because their bodies are built to handle large, uneven patterns of food intake, where eating happens in distinct moments and then stops for extended stretches. In these patterns, the body is prepared to receive a large amount of food at once, store it efficiently, and then release that stored energy slowly over time while reducing the need for further intake. This approach can be seen across many species, especially those that depend on hunting or seasonal food availability. After feeding, their bodies enter a state where digestion is slow and sustained, and signals related to hunger remain low for longer periods. The human body, by contrast, tends to work with smaller, more continuous inputs of energy, and this difference shapes how hunger is experienced. One reason for this difference lies in how digestion and absorption occur. In many animals that eat large meals, the digestive system is adapted to process food over a longer period, extracting energy gradually and maintaining a steady supply without frequent feeding. The human digestive system also processes food over time, but the pattern is often shorter, especially when the food is easier to break down. In early human environments, food sources were varied and often required effort to obtain and process. Plants, roots, nuts, and occasional animal foods provided energy in different forms, and meals were not always large or predictable. Instead of relying on rare, large feeding events, early humans likely consumed smaller amounts whenever food was available. This pattern would have supported a more continuous intake of energy rather than long cycles of feeding and fasting. As a result, the body developed a system that expects more frequent input and signals hunger accordingly. Another important factor is how energy is stored and used. Animals that tolerate long periods without food often have adaptations that allow them to store large amounts of energy and access it efficiently without disrupting their internal balance. Some can maintain stable function while relying heavily on stored fat for extended periods. Humans also store energy in fat, but the way this energy is used tends to be more closely regulated, with a preference for maintaining stable levels of readily available energy in the blood. This means that even when total reserves are sufficient, the body continues to monitor short-term availability and may signal hunger if it begins to decrease. In early human life, this would have supported a pattern of regular foraging and gathering, where energy was replenished in smaller, more frequent amounts rather than in large, infrequent meals. The environment in which early humans lived also played a role. Food sources were often scattered and required movement to find. Opportunities to eat might appear in small quantities rather than in large, concentrated events. This encouraged a pattern of eating that matched availability, rather than waiting for a single large opportunity. Over time, the body adapted to this pattern by maintaining sensitivity to small changes in energy, and by signaling hunger in a way that supported frequent engagement with the environment. In contrast, many animals are adapted to environments where food appears in larger but less frequent events, and their bodies reflect this difference. The structure of feeding behavior also influences how hunger is felt. Animals that consume large meals may experience a strong sense of fullness that lasts for a long time, followed by a gradual return of hunger. Humans often experience a shorter cycle, where fullness decreases more quickly and hunger returns sooner. This does not necessarily mean the body is using energy inefficiently. It reflects a system that is tuned to different conditions. In early human contexts, where movement, observation, and interaction were continuous, a shorter cycle would have supported ongoing activity rather than long periods of rest after feeding. This creates a pattern where hunger appears more often, but in a milder form, guiding behavior without requiring large swings between extremes. The difference between humans and many animals, therefore, is not simply about how much food is needed, but about how the body is organized to receive and use that food over time. Humans tend to operate within a more continuous flow of intake and use, while many animals are adapted to more distinct cycles. This difference, shaped over long periods in different environments, helps explain why humans often feel hungry more frequently, even when the total amount of energy available in the body is not low, and why this pattern remains consistent even in modern settings where food is no longer scarce in the same way. The ability of many animals to remain without food for long periods is closely connected to how their bodies shift between different metabolic states, and this shift is often more pronounced and efficient than in humans. After a large meal, some animals move into a phase where digestion continues slowly, and the body begins to rely more heavily on stored energy, without creating strong signals to eat again. This transition is supported by hormonal changes that reduce appetite and stabilize energy use over time. In humans, similar processes exist, but they tend to be less extreme and more sensitive to small changes. The body can move from using recently consumed energy to drawing on stored reserves, but it often continues to send hunger signals during this process. This reflects a system that remains attentive to short-term availability rather than fully committing to long-term reliance on stored energy. In early human environments, this sensitivity would have supported a pattern of continuous engagement with food sources. Humans did not depend on rare, large feeding events as their primary strategy. Instead, they interacted with the environment in a more constant way, gathering small amounts, observing, and moving across landscapes where food could appear in different forms and quantities. The body, in turn, maintained a level of responsiveness that encouraged this ongoing interaction. Another important detail is how quickly energy becomes available after eating. In many animals that consume large meals, the release of energy can be slower and more extended, allowing the body to maintain stable function for longer periods without additional intake. In humans, especially when consuming foods that are easier to digest, energy can enter the bloodstream more quickly, but may also be used or stored in a way that leads to a shorter period of sustained availability. This does not mean the system is less effective. It reflects a balance between quick access and ongoing use, shaped by the types of food that were commonly available during human development. Early human diets included a wide range of foods, some of which required processing and provided energy over time, while others offered more immediate energy. This variety would have supported a flexible system that could handle different inputs, but it also meant that the body did not become specialized for long periods without food. Instead, it remained adaptable, with signals that encouraged regular intake when possible. The structure of the digestive system also plays a role. While the human digestive tract is capable of processing complex foods, it is not designed for extremely prolonged digestion of very large meals in the same way as seen in some other species. This influences how long the feeling of fullness lasts and how soon hunger begins to return. In early human contexts, where food was not always abundant in large quantities, this structure would have supported a pattern of eating smaller amounts more frequently rather than relying on rare, large meals. Over time, this pattern became part of how the body expects energy to be supplied. The environment further shaped this expectation. Food sources were often dispersed, and obtaining them required movement, attention, and cooperation. Humans did not remain in one place waiting for a single large opportunity. They moved through landscapes, gathering what was available, and this created a rhythm of intake that matched opportunity rather than abundance. The body adapted by maintaining sensitivity to energy changes, and by signaling hunger in a way that supported continued searching. In contrast, animals that depend on large, infrequent meals often live in environments where such meals are a central part of survival, and their bodies reflect this difference by allowing longer periods of low signaling between feeding events. In modern life, where food is often concentrated and easily accessible, the human system continues to operate with the same sensitivity and expectations. Hunger can return sooner, not because the body has failed to extract enough energy, but because the system is designed to check often and respond early. The difference between humans and many animals, therefore, lies not only in how much food is needed, but in how the body manages the timing of intake and the transition between energy sources. Humans tend to maintain a more continuous relationship with food, shaped by a long history of varied diets and dispersed resources, and this leads to a pattern where hunger appears more frequently, guiding behavior in a way that once matched the conditions of early human life. Another quiet difference between humans and many animals can be seen in how the body connects feeding with opportunity rather than waiting, and this connection shapes not only when food is eaten but how often the feeling of hunger returns. In many species that depend on large, infrequent meals, feeding is closely tied to specific events, such as a successful hunt or a seasonal change. Their bodies are adapted to wait for these events, and when they occur, the response is strong and complete. Afterward, the body settles into a longer period of low demand, supported by stored energy and reduced activity. In humans, the pattern is less tied to single events and more connected to ongoing availability. Early humans did not rely on one large success to sustain them for long periods. Instead, they moved through environments where food could appear in smaller amounts across time, and this required a different kind of response. The body became attuned to recognizing and using these small opportunities rather than waiting for a single large one. This difference can be understood through the way the brain and body respond to the presence of food. When food is seen, smelled, or even expected, the human body begins to prepare. This preparation includes changes in attention, digestion, and hormone levels, all of which can increase the feeling of hunger or make food more appealing. These responses are widely observed and reflect a system that is ready to act quickly when food is available. In early human life, this readiness would have been useful because food was not always predictable or guaranteed. Small amounts of food gathered over time could contribute to survival just as much as larger, less frequent meals. The body therefore learned to respond to opportunity as it appeared, encouraging intake even when energy levels were not critically low. This creates a pattern where hunger is not only a response to shortage, but also a response to possibility. In contrast, many animals are less influenced by immediate opportunity unless it fits within their feeding cycle. Their bodies may not respond as strongly to small scattered food sources because their survival strategy depends on different patterns. The human system, shaped by a more varied and flexible diet, remains sensitive to a wider range of cues. This sensitivity can make hunger feel more frequent, especially in environments where food is visible or easily imagined. The digestive and metabolic systems support this pattern by allowing the body to handle repeated intake without requiring long recovery periods between meals. In early human environments, this would have allowed individuals to gather and consume food throughout the day, maintaining a steady flow of energy rather than depending on large isolated events. The social structure of early human groups also reinforced this pattern. Food sharing, cooperative gathering, and group movement created multiple moments of intake rather than a single coordinated feeding time. The body adapted to these conditions by maintaining a level of readiness that supported frequent eating when possible. Over time, this readiness became part of the normal experience of hunger. In modern settings, where food is not only available but often abundant, this same system can feel excessive. The body continues to respond to opportunity, even when there is no need to act on it. Hunger can arise in response to cues rather than necessity, creating a pattern that feels more frequent than expected. From a broader perspective, this reflects a system that was designed to match a world of scattered resources and constant movement. The human body did not evolve to ignore small opportunities or to wait for perfect conditions. It evolved to respond early, to use what was available, and to maintain a steady connection between internal signals and external possibilities. This connection helps explain why humans often feel hungry more often than animals, not because they require more food in total, but because their bodies are organized to recognize and respond to food whenever it appears, carrying forward a pattern that was shaped by long periods of human life, in environments where opportunity was brief and could not be easily predicted or repeated. In the modern world, meals often follow a clear pattern, appearing at similar times each day, and this regularity can make hunger feel predictable, as if it belongs to the clock rather than to the body. But this pattern is relatively recent in human history. For most of human existence, there were no fixed times for eating, no shared expectation of morning, midday, and evening meals. Early humans lived in environments where food appeared irregularly, sometimes in small amounts, sometimes not at all, and this shaped how the body learned to anticipate and respond. Instead of being guided by a strict schedule, hunger was influenced by movement, opportunity, and the changing conditions of the environment. The body learned to stay flexible, to respond when food was available rather than waiting for a specific time. This flexibility meant that hunger signals were not tied to a daily structure, but to patterns of activity and availability that could change from one day to the next. Over time, as human societies became more settled and food sources became more stable, regular meal patterns began to form. Agriculture allowed food to be stored, and communities could organize their days around predictable access to meals. This change introduced a new kind of rhythm, one that the body gradually adapted to. The brain began to associate certain times of day with eating, and it learned to prepare in advance. This preparation involves changes in hormones and attention that can create a feeling similar to hunger even before food is needed. This is a well-understood process in physiology, where learned patterns can shape bodily responses. The body is not only reacting to internal energy levels, but also to repeated experiences. When meals occur at the same times each day, the signals that encourage eating begin to rise in anticipation, creating a sense of hunger that aligns with the schedule. In early human life, anticipation existed as well, but it was linked to environmental cues rather than fixed hours. Light, temperature, movement, and social activity all played a role in shaping when food might be found. The body responded to these cues in a flexible way, without becoming dependent on a strict routine. Hunger could appear at different times depending on what was happening in the surroundings. This created a pattern that was less predictable but more closely tied to actual conditions. In contrast, modern meal patterns can make hunger feel more frequent because the body is trained to expect food at regular intervals. Even if energy levels are still sufficient, the anticipation of eating can trigger the feeling. This does not mean the hunger is false. It reflects a learned connection between time and intake that has become part of the body's rhythm. The digestive system also adapts to these patterns, becoming more active at expected times and less active outside them. This reinforces the cycle, making hunger feel stronger when it aligns with routine. The shift from irregular to regular eating patterns has therefore changed how hunger is experienced. Even though the underlying biology remains the same, the body still monitors energy and responds to internal signals, but it also responds to learned patterns that were not present in the same way during most of human history. This combination can make hunger feel more frequent, as it is influenced both by actual energy use and by expectation. In early human environments where food was uncertain and timing was variable, the body relied more on immediate signals and less on fixed anticipation. In modern environments where food is predictable and often abundant, anticipation plays a larger role, adding another layer to the experience of hunger. This layered system reflects both the older conditions in which the body evolved and the newer conditions in which it now operates, creating a pattern where hunger appears not only in response to need, but also in response to habit and expectation, shaped over time by the repeated structure of daily life. When meals begin to follow a regular pattern, the body does not simply respond in a passive way, but actively prepares itself in advance. And this preparation can shape the feeling of hunger even before any true need for energy appears. The brain and digestive system work together to anticipate incoming food, adjusting processes so that the body is ready to receive and use it efficiently. This includes changes in hormone levels that can increase appetite, shifts in attention that make food more noticeable, and physical responses such as the release of digestive fluids. These reactions are widely observed and are part of how the body learns from repeated experience. When food arrives at similar times each day, the body begins to expect it, and this expectation becomes a signal in itself. Hunger, in this case, is not only a response to current energy levels, but also a response to learned timing. In early human environments, this kind of anticipation existed in a different form. It was not tied to a fixed schedule, but to patterns in the environment, such as the time of day when certain foods were easier to find, or the movements of animals that could be followed. The body responded to these patterns by preparing for action when conditions suggested that food might be available. This created a flexible system where anticipation was linked to opportunity rather than to a clock. As human societies developed more stable food systems, the source of anticipation shifted. Instead of responding mainly to environmental cues, the body began to respond to repeated daily routines. This change allowed for more predictable eating, but it also introduced a new layer to the experience of hunger. The body could begin to feel hungry simply because it was approaching a usual mealtime, even if energy stores were still adequate. This does not mean the signal is incorrect. It reflects a system that has learned to align its internal processes with external patterns. Over time, this alignment becomes stronger, making hunger feel more frequent and more structured. The digestive system reinforces this pattern by becoming more active at expected times. When the body anticipates food, it increases readiness in ways that can make the absence of food more noticeable. If a meal is delayed, the signals that were preparing for it may remain active, creating a stronger sense of hunger than would occur without that expectation. This can make hunger feel more urgent, even though the body is still capable of functioning without immediate intake. In early human life, delays and irregular timing were common, and the body was adapted to handle them without relying on fixed patterns. The signals that guided behavior were more closely tied to actual conditions than to repeated schedules. Another aspect is how memory influences these responses. The brain remembers not only when food is usually eaten, but also the experience associated with it, including taste, satisfaction, and social context. These memories can strengthen anticipation, making the body more responsive to expected meals. In early human groups, shared eating experiences and repeated behaviors would have created similar associations, but they were linked to environmental events rather than to precise timing. The modern structure of daily meals makes these associations more consistent and therefore more influential. The result is a system where hunger can arise from multiple sources at once: current energy use, slight changes in internal balance, and learned expectations based on routine. This combination can make hunger feel more frequent, even when the body does not urgently require food. It reflects an interaction between an older biological system and newer patterns of living. The body continues to operate according to principles that developed over long periods of human history, while also adapting to the regularity of modern life. Hunger, in this context, becomes not only a signal of need, but also a signal of timing, shaped by repeated experience and the body's ability to learn from its environment, creating a rhythm that blends internal processes with the structure of daily life. When a pattern of eating is repeated over many days, the body begins to treat that pattern as part of its internal organization, and this can be observed in how closely hunger follows routine even when the surrounding conditions change. The human body is influenced by internal timing systems that regulate many processes across the day, including sleep, alertness, and digestion. These timing systems, often referred to in biology as circadian rhythms, help coordinate when different functions are more active or more quiet. Hunger becomes connected to these rhythms through repeated experience. When meals occur at similar times, the body aligns its internal signals with those moments, increasing readiness for food as those times approach. This alignment is widely accepted in physiology. The signals that contribute to hunger, including those from the brain and digestive system, begin to rise in anticipation, preparing the body for intake. If the expected meal does not occur, these signals do not disappear immediately. They can remain active for a period of time, creating a sustained feeling of hunger that reflects expectation rather than urgent need. In early human environments, internal timing systems were still present, but they were linked more closely to natural cycles such as light and darkness, temperature, and activity patterns. Food availability was not tied to fixed hours, so hunger was less likely to become anchored to specific times of day. Instead, it followed a more variable pattern, influenced by movement, opportunity, and environmental conditions. The body remained flexible, adjusting its signals based on what was happening rather than on a repeated schedule. As human societies developed more stable access to food, daily routines became more consistent, and the body adapted by integrating these routines into its timing systems. This integration allows the body to prepare efficiently, but it also increases the frequency with which hunger is felt, because signals are now triggered both by internal energy use and by learned timing. Another factor is that internal timing systems do not operate in isolation. They interact with behavior, light exposure, and social patterns, all of which can influence when hunger signals appear. For example, changes in daily schedule, such as waking earlier or later, can shift the timing of hunger, showing that the system is responsive to external cues as well as to internal ones. This responsiveness reflects a system that is adaptable, but also one that can become strongly influenced by repeated patterns. In modern environments, where meals are often scheduled and food is consistently available, the combination of internal timing and learned routine can make hunger feel more frequent and more structured than it would in less predictable conditions. The body continues to operate according to principles that were shaped in environments where flexibility was essential, but it also incorporates new patterns that come from repeated daily behavior. The result is a layered experience of hunger, where signals arise not only from current energy needs but also from the alignment of internal rhythms with expected times of eating. This does not indicate a problem in the system. It reflects the body's ability to learn and adapt, using timing as a way to organize behavior and maintain readiness. In early human life, readiness was linked to the environment and to the actions of the group. In modern life, it is often linked to the clock and to individual routine. Hunger follows this shift, becoming part of a structured rhythm that repeats each day, even though the underlying biological system remains the same. This helps explain why humans may feel hungry more often than animals, as their experience of hunger is shaped not only by biological need, but also by timing systems that have adapted to regular patterns of life, creating signals that appear in anticipation as well as in response to change. In modern environments, the types of food that are most commonly available are often different from those that shape the human body over long periods of time, and this difference can influence how quickly hunger returns after eating. Many foods today are easier to digest and absorb, meaning that energy can enter the bloodstream relatively quickly. This can create a rapid rise in available energy, followed by a gradual decline as the body uses or stores it. The process itself is normal and well understood in physiology, but the speed of these changes can affect how the body experiences fullness and hunger. When energy becomes available quickly and is then used or regulated, the signals that encourage eating can return sooner than they might with foods that release energy more slowly. This does not mean that the food is lacking in total energy. It reflects how the timing of energy availability interacts with the body's signaling system. In earlier human environments, food often required more effort to process and digest. Many plant foods contained fiber and structural components that slowed down digestion, while animal foods, depending on their form, could also take time to break down. This created a pattern where energy was released more gradually, supporting a longer sense of fullness. The human digestive system is capable of handling a wide range of foods, but it responds differently depending on how quickly those foods are broken down. When digestion is slower, signals of fullness can last longer, and hunger may take more time to return. When digestion is faster, the cycle of energy availability and use becomes shorter, and the body may signal hunger again sooner. This difference becomes more noticeable when considering how the brain responds to changes in available energy. The brain monitors levels in the blood and adjusts signals based on how those levels change over time. A gradual decline can be managed without strong signals, while a quicker shift may be more noticeable, leading to an earlier return of hunger. In early human life, where food sources varied and often required effort to obtain and process, the balance between quick and slow energy release would have been shaped by the environment. Humans likely encountered a mix of foods that provided both immediate and sustained energy, and the body adapted to this variability by maintaining sensitivity to changes rather than relying on a single pattern. In modern settings, where foods that are easier to digest are widely available, the balance can shift toward faster cycles of energy availability. This does not mean that all foods function in the same way, but it does highlight how the structure of the diet can influence the rhythm of hunger. Another aspect is how these foods interact with the body's existing systems of anticipation and timing. When energy becomes available quickly and is followed by a return of hunger, the body may reinforce patterns of more frequent eating. Over time, this can strengthen the connection between certain foods and the timing of hunger signals. The digestive system, the brain, and learned behavior all contribute to this pattern. In early human environments where food was not always easy to obtain, the timing of intake was more closely linked to opportunity than to rapid cycles of availability. The body remained flexible, responding to what was present rather than to a repeated pattern of quick intake and return of hunger. In contrast, modern food environments can create a more regular and frequent cycle, where hunger appears at shorter intervals. This reflects an interaction between the biological systems that regulate energy and the types of food that are commonly consumed. The human body continues to operate with the same underlying mechanisms, but the conditions in which those mechanisms are expressed have changed. Hunger, in this context, becomes not only a signal of energy use, but also a reflection of how quickly energy is delivered and processed, shaped by both the long history of human adaptation and the more recent changes in the kinds of food that are available and how they are consumed. The way food is processed before it is eaten can also influence how quickly hunger returns, and this effect is widely recognized in nutrition and physiology. When food is broken down into smaller, softer forms, either through cooking, grinding, or refining, it becomes easier for the body to digest and absorb. This means that energy from the food can enter the bloodstream more rapidly. While this can be efficient in terms of making energy available, it also changes the timing of how long that energy supports the body. A faster rise in available energy is often followed by a gradual reduction as the body uses or stores it, and the signals that regulate hunger can respond to these changes. When the shift is more noticeable over a shorter period, the feeling of hunger may return sooner. This is not a malfunction. It reflects how the body responds to the speed of energy delivery rather than only to the total amount consumed. In earlier human environments, much of the food required more effort to process, both before and during digestion. Tools were used, and cooking became an important part of human development. But even with these processes, many foods retained structures that slowed digestion. Fibrous plant materials, whole seeds, and less processed animal foods required time for the body to break down. This created a more gradual release of energy, which could support longer periods between feelings of hunger. The human digestive system evolved alongside these conditions, developing the ability to handle a wide range of foods, but also becoming accustomed to patterns where energy was released over time rather than all at once. In modern environments, food processing can significantly alter this pattern. Removing fiber, changing texture, or refining ingredients can make food easier to digest, and this can shorten the time between eating and the return of hunger signals. This does not mean that such foods lack energy. It shows that the form of the food matters for how the body experiences it over time. Another important aspect is how these changes interact with the body's signaling systems. Hormones involved in regulating hunger and fullness respond not only to how much food is eaten, but also to how quickly it is digested and absorbed. When food moves quickly through the digestive process, signals of fullness may rise and fall within a shorter period. This can lead to a cycle where hunger returns sooner, even though the body has received sufficient energy. These processes are supported by well-established research and reflect the body's sensitivity to timing as well as quantity. In early human life, where food was less processed and often required more effort to obtain and consume, the timing of these signals would have been different. Hunger would still appear regularly, but the intervals between strong signals could be longer depending on the type of food available. The environment shaped these patterns by influencing what kinds of foods were eaten and how they were prepared. As human societies developed new methods of processing and storing food, the timing of energy availability changed, and the body adapted by continuing to respond to the speed of digestion. The result in modern settings is a pattern where hunger can feel more frequent, not because the body requires more total energy, but because the signals that regulate hunger are responding to quicker changes in energy availability. This creates a rhythm that is shorter and more repeated, shaped by both biological systems and the structure of the food itself. From a broader perspective, this reflects an interaction between long-established human physiology and more recent changes in how food is prepared and consumed. The body continues to operate with mechanisms that were shaped in environments with slower and more varied patterns of digestion, while adapting to conditions where energy can be delivered more quickly. Hunger becomes part of this interaction, appearing as a signal that reflects not only the amount of energy in the body, but also the way that energy moves through the system over time. The feeling of fullness is not determined only by how much energy a meal contains, but also by how the body senses the physical presence of food during and after eating. And this adds another layer to why hunger can return more quickly in modern conditions. The stomach and digestive tract contain sensors that respond to stretching, texture, and the movement of food. When food occupies space and remains there for a longer time, these sensors send signals that support a sustained sense of fullness. When food is lighter, more processed, or moves through the digestive system more quickly, the physical signals of fullness can fade sooner, even if the body has already received enough energy. This distinction between energy content and physical presence is well recognized in physiology and helps explain why two meals with similar energy can produce different experiences of hunger afterward. In earlier human environments, many foods naturally required more chewing, took up more space, and remained in the digestive system for longer periods. Plant foods often contained fiber and structural elements that slowed movement, while animal foods, depending on how they were prepared, could also contribute to a longer-lasting sense of fullness. These conditions created a pattern where the body received both sustained energy and sustained physical signals, reinforcing each other and extending the time before hunger returned. The human body adapted to these conditions by integrating both types of signals into its regulation of appetite. In modern settings, where many foods are softer, more refined, or easier to consume quickly, this balance can shift. Food may be eaten faster, pass through the stomach more quickly, and produce shorter-lasting physical signals, even though the energy content is sufficient. This can lead to a situation where the body has already received energy, but the signals that support fullness are fading, allowing hunger to return sooner. The brain integrates these different signals, combining information about energy availability with information about the physical state of the digestive system. When one set of signals decreases before the other, the overall experience can shift toward hunger even if total energy remains adequate. Another important factor is how eating speed interacts with these processes. When food is consumed quickly, the body may not have enough time to fully register the signals of fullness before a significant amount has already been eaten. This is a well-documented effect, and it shows that timing plays a role not only after eating but also during the meal itself. In early human life, eating often required more time and effort, whether through chewing, processing, or sharing food within a group. This slower pace would have allowed signals of fullness to develop more gradually and align more closely with energy intake. In contrast, faster consumption can create a mismatch, where fullness signals arrive later, and hunger returns sooner once those signals begin to fade. The environment in which early humans lived also contributed to this pattern. Food was not always consumed in large, rapid amounts, but often gathered and eaten over time. This created a more extended interaction with food, supporting both physical and metabolic signals of fullness. The body adapted to these patterns by maintaining sensitivity to both types of input. In modern environments, where meals can be consumed quickly and food is often designed for ease of eating, the timing of these signals can change. Hunger may return sooner, not because the body has used all the available energy, but because the signals that support fullness have diminished. From a broader perspective, This reflects how the human experience of hunger is shaped by multiple layers, including energy balance, physical sensation, and the timing of digestion. The body continues to operate with systems that were shaped in environments where food had different properties and was consumed under different conditions. When those conditions change, the same systems can produce a different rhythm, one in which hunger appears more frequently as the body responds to the way food is processed, consumed, and sensed over time, maintaining a connection between internal signals and the physical experience of eating that has been part of human life across many generations. In addition to signals from the body, the human experience of hunger is also shaped by the way the brain pays attention to food, and this creates a difference between humans and many other animals that is not only physical but also mental. The human brain has a strong ability to imagine, remember, and anticipate, and these abilities can bring the idea of food into awareness even when the body is not in immediate need of energy. This is not a separate system from hunger, but an extension of it. The same brain that monitors internal energy also processes sights, smells, and memories, and it can connect these inputs to the feeling of hunger. When a person sees food, thinks about it, or remembers a past meal, the brain can activate responses that are similar to those triggered by actual energy changes. This effect is widely observed and reflects the role of learning and memory in shaping appetite. In early human environments, this ability would have supported survival. Remembering where food was found, recognizing signs of edible plants or animals, and anticipating future opportunities were important skills. The brain used these abilities to guide behavior, and the feeling of hunger became linked not only to current energy levels but also to information about the environment. This created a system where thinking about food could prepare the body for action, increasing attention and readiness. The signals were not false. They were part of a broader system that connected internal need with external knowledge. In contrast, many animals rely more heavily on immediate sensory input and less on extended imagination or long-term planning. Their responses to food are often more directly tied to presence rather than to thought. This does not mean they lack awareness, but the structure of their cognition is different. The human ability to think beyond the present moment allows hunger to appear in more situations, because the brain can simulate or recall food without it being physically present. This adds a layer to the experience that can make hunger feel more frequent. The environment in which modern humans live amplifies this effect. Food is often visible, advertised, or easily imagined, and these cues can activate the same systems that respond to actual need. The brain does not fully separate internal signals from external ones. When it processes information about food, it can influence the body in ways that resemble physical hunger, including changes in attention, saliva production, and motivation. These responses are part of normal physiology and reflect the integration of perception and internal regulation. In early human life, such cues would have been tied more directly to real opportunities, as seeing or smelling food usually meant that it was available. In modern settings, cues can appear without immediate access or without actual need, creating a more frequent activation of hunger-related systems. Another aspect is that the human brain can maintain attention on food over time, revisiting the idea repeatedly. This sustained attention can keep hunger signals active, even if they were initially mild. The body responds not only to the first signal but also to the continued focus, reinforcing the feeling. In early human environments, this sustained attention would have been useful for tracking resources and planning movement. It kept the individual engaged with important aspects of survival. In modern environments, where food-related information is constant, the same ability can lead to a more continuous awareness of hunger. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger in humans is not only a physical signal, but also a cognitive experience. It is shaped by the brain's ability to connect internal states with external information, creating a system that is responsive to both. This system helped early humans navigate complex environments where knowledge and memory were essential, and it continues to operate today, even in conditions where food is abundant. The result is a pattern where hunger can arise more often, influenced not only by the body's need for energy, but also by the mind's capacity to imagine, remember, and anticipate, carrying forward a way of interacting with food that was shaped by long periods of human life, in environments where attention to food was closely tied to survival. The connection between the mind and hunger becomes clearer when we notice that attention itself can change how strongly hunger is felt, even when the body's energy state has not changed. The brain does not simply receive signals from the body in a neutral way. It interprets them, compares them with memory, and adjusts their importance based on what is happening around us. When attention is directed toward food, even in a quiet and subtle way, the signals related to hunger can become more noticeable. This is a well-observed effect in human physiology and psychology, showing that perception and internal regulation are closely linked. The same signal can feel stronger or weaker depending on where attention is placed. In early human environments, this link between attention and hunger would have been useful because it helped guide behavior toward important resources. When early humans focused on signs of food, such as plants, animals, or tracks, the body would become more responsive, increasing readiness to act. Hunger was not only a measure of energy, but also a way to align the body with the task of finding food. The brain used attention to amplify relevant signals, making them easier to notice and respond to. This created a system where awareness and need worked together. In modern environments where food-related cues are frequent and often unrelated to actual need, this same system can lead to a more constant awareness of hunger. Visual images, smells, and even conversations about food can direct attention in a way that strengthens hunger signals. The body responds to these cues because it has learned that they are important, even if the context has changed. This does not mean the signals are incorrect. It reflects a system that integrates multiple sources of information, treating attention as part of how hunger is regulated. Another aspect is that the brain can shift attention quickly and repeatedly, returning to the idea of food even without a clear reason. This repeated focus can keep hunger signals active over time. The body does not fully reset between these moments of attention. Instead, each return to the idea of food can reinforce the previous signal, creating a sense of continuity. In early human life, this pattern would have supported tracking and planning, allowing individuals to stay engaged with the search for food across changing conditions. It helped maintain direction and purpose in environments where resources were not always visible. In modern life, where food is easily accessible, the same pattern can make hunger feel more frequent and more persistent. The role of expectation also becomes important here. When the brain expects that food will be available, attention naturally shifts toward it, and hunger signals can increase in response. This expectation can be formed through routine, memory, or repeated exposure to certain environments. For example, being in a place where food is usually consumed can trigger both attention and hunger, even if the body does not require immediate energy. This is widely recognized in studies of behavior and shows how context influences internal states. The body and mind work together, using both internal signals and external cues to guide behavior. In early human environments, this integration would have been closely aligned with survival, as attention to food often led directly to finding it. In modern environments, the alignment is less direct, but the system continues to operate in the same way. The result is that hunger can arise from a combination of physical need and mental focus, making it feel more frequent than it would if it depended only on internal energy levels. This layered experience reflects the complexity of the human system, where biological signals and cognitive processes are intertwined, and where the ability to think, remember, and focus can shape how the body experiences hunger across time. There is another layer in the human experience of hunger that comes from how the brain gives meaning to the feeling itself, shaping whether it is noticed, ignored, or allowed to grow. The body sends signals continuously, but the brain decides which signals become part of conscious awareness. This process is influenced by memory, context, and expectation, and it can change how hunger is experienced from one moment to the next. A small signal can remain in the background if attention is directed elsewhere, or it can become more noticeable if the mind turns toward it. This does not change the signal itself, but it changes how it is felt. In early human environments, this ability to shift attention would have been important for balancing different needs. At times, it may have been useful to remain focused on movement, safety, or cooperation, even when hunger was present. At other times, bringing hunger into awareness would have helped guide the search for food. The brain allowed flexibility, deciding when the signals should influence behavior more strongly. This created a system where hunger was not always constant in experience, even if it was present in the body. In modern environments, Where food-related cues are frequent and often easy to access, the balance can shift toward noticing hunger more often. The brain may give more importance to food-related signals because they are repeatedly reinforced by the environment. This can make hunger feel more persistent, even if the underlying signals have not changed significantly. Another aspect is that the human brain can link hunger with emotion and past experience, which adds depth to the feeling. Hunger is not only a physical state, but also part of a broader experience that can include comfort, memory, and expectation. These associations are well documented and show that the brain integrates multiple dimensions when interpreting bodily signals. When hunger is linked to positive experiences, the brain may be more likely to notice and respond to it. In early human life, this connection would have supported learning, helping individuals remember which foods were beneficial and where they were found. The emotional aspect reinforced behavior that supported survival. In modern life, these associations can become more frequent and less tied to immediate need, as food is often connected to routine, social interaction, and environment. The result is that hunger can be felt not only as a signal of energy use, but also as part of a learned and remembered experience. The brain also has the ability to predict future states, and this prediction can influence present feelings. When the brain expects that hunger will increase, it may bring the sensation into awareness earlier, preparing the individual to respond. This predictive function is widely recognized and reflects how the brain uses past experience to guide current behavior. In early human environments, this would have allowed individuals to act before conditions became difficult, using memory and expectation to stay ahead of need. In modern environments, where food is readily available, the same predictive system can make hunger feel more frequent as the brain anticipates rather than waits. The combination of attention, meaning, and prediction creates a layered experience where hunger is shaped not only by the body's current state, but also by how the brain interprets and prioritizes signals. This integration allows the human system to remain flexible and responsive, but it also increases the number of situations in which hunger can be felt. From a broader perspective, this reflects a system that was designed to connect internal needs with a complex and changing environment, using the full capacity of the brain to guide behavior. Hunger, in this sense, becomes part of a continuous interaction between body and mind, where signals are not simply received, but are shaped, interpreted, and used to prepare for what might come next, carrying forward patterns that were formed in early human life and remain active even in conditions that are very different today. In natural environments, many animals consume foods that require more time and effort to break down, and this difference in the structure of their diet plays a quiet but important role in how often they feel hunger. Leaves, raw plant materials, whole seeds, and unprocessed animal tissues often contain components that slow digestion, such as fiber or dense protein structures. These elements take time for the body to process, and as a result, energy is released gradually rather than quickly. This slower release helps maintain a steady supply of energy over longer periods, reducing the need for frequent feeding. The human digestive system is capable of handling similar foods, but the pattern of eating in modern environments often includes foods that are easier to digest and absorb, leading to a different rhythm. In early human life, the diet was varied and depended on what could be found or gathered. Many foods would have required chewing, processing, and time to digest, creating a pattern where energy entered the body more slowly. This does not mean that early humans never consumed foods that provided quicker energy, but the overall balance included many items that supported longer digestion. The body adapted to this variety by maintaining sensitivity to changes in energy, while also benefiting from periods of sustained release. This combination allowed early humans to remain active without needing constant intake, while still responding when new food became available. In contrast, many animals rely heavily on foods that naturally slow the digestive process. Herbivores, for example, consume large amounts of plant material that require extended digestion, and their bodies are adapted to extract energy over time. Carnivores that consume whole prey may also experience prolonged digestion due to the structure of the food. In both cases, the result is a longer-lasting sense of fullness and a reduced frequency of hunger signals. The human system, while flexible, often operates with a shorter cycle when food is easier to process. This difference becomes more noticeable when considering how the body senses the presence of food in the digestive system. Slower moving food maintains physical and chemical signals for a longer period, reinforcing fullness. Faster moving food allows these signals to fade sooner, making space for hunger to return. In early human environments, where food was less processed and often required effort to obtain and prepare, the balance between these signals would have supported a rhythm that was less frequent than in modern settings, but still more continuous than in many animals. The environment shaped this rhythm by influencing what foods were available and how they were consumed. Humans adapted to a wide range of conditions, and their digestive system reflects this adaptability rather than specialization for one extreme pattern. Another factor is that animals often consume food that is closely matched to their digestive systems, having evolved alongside specific diets over long periods. This alignment allows their bodies to handle large quantities and long digestion times efficiently. Humans, by contrast, developed as generalists, capable of eating a wide range of foods. This flexibility supports survival across different environments, but it also means that the body does not rely on a single, slow pattern of digestion. Instead, it remains responsive to different types of input, adjusting signals based on how food is processed and absorbed. In modern environments, where many foods are designed or prepared to be easy to consume, this responsiveness can lead to a quicker cycle of hunger and fullness. The body continues to monitor changes and respond accordingly, creating a pattern where hunger appears more often. From a broader perspective, this reflects a system that balances flexibility with sensitivity, shaped by a long history of varied diets and changing conditions. The human body is not fixed to one type of food or one rhythm of intake. It adapts to what is available, and in doing so, it produces signals that reflect both the nature of the food and the way it is processed over time, contributing to the experience of hunger as a recurring and adaptive part of daily life. The difference in how long fullness lasts is also influenced by how the body measures the presence of food over time, not only through chemical signals, but through the ongoing interaction between the digestive system and the brain. When food remains in the stomach and intestines for a longer period, it continues to stimulate receptors that send signals of fullness, helping to maintain a steady sense of satisfaction. In many animals that consume foods requiring extended digestion, this interaction can last for long periods, supporting a stable state in which hunger signals remain low. The human body uses similar mechanisms, but the duration of these signals often depends on the type of food and how it moves through the digestive system. When food passes more quickly, the physical and chemical signals that support fullness begin to decrease sooner, allowing hunger to return even if the body has already received enough energy. In early human environments, where food often required time to chew, process, and digest, the interaction between the digestive system and the brain would have supported a longer-lasting sense of fullness. This does not mean that early humans were always full for long periods, but it suggests that the rhythm of hunger was influenced by foods that maintained signals over time. The body adapted to these conditions by integrating information about both energy and physical presence, creating a balanced system that responded to multiple inputs. In contrast, many animals have digestive systems that are highly specialized for their typical diet, allowing them to extract energy efficiently over extended periods. Herbivores, for example, may rely on fermentation processes that break down plant material slowly, providing a steady release of energy and maintaining fullness. Carnivores may process large meals in ways that sustain energy over time, reducing the need for frequent feeding. The human system, while capable of handling a variety of foods, does not depend on a single prolonged digestive process to the same extent. Instead, it remains adaptable, responding to different types of food with different patterns of signaling. This adaptability supports survival across varied environments, but it also means that the duration of fullness can vary widely depending on what is eaten. Another factor is how the body regulates the movement of food through the digestive tract. This movement is influenced by the composition of the meal, including its fiber content, structure, and how it was prepared. Foods that take longer to break down can slow this movement, maintaining signals of fullness for a longer time. Foods that are easier to digest may move more quickly, shortening the duration of these signals. This process is well understood and reflects the body's ability to adjust digestion based on the characteristics of the food. In early human life, where foods were often less processed and more varied in structure, This adjustment would have created a rhythm that supported both sustained energy and flexibility. The environment played a role by determining what types of foods were available and how they were consumed. In modern environments, where many foods are prepared to be easily digested, the balance can shift towards shorter cycles of fullness and hunger. The body continues to operate with the same underlying mechanisms, but the conditions in which those mechanisms function have changed. The result is that hunger can appear more frequently as the signals that support fullness diminish more quickly. From a broader perspective, this reflects a system that is responsive rather than fixed, shaped by a long history of adapting to different foods and environments. The human body does not rely on a single pattern of digestion or a single duration of fullness. It adjusts continuously, and in doing so, it produces signals that reflect both the nature of the food and the way it is processed over time, contributing to the experience of hunger as a recurring and adaptive part of life. Another difference can be seen in how animals interact with their food over time, not only in what they eat but in how long the act of feeding itself lasts. And this has a quiet influence on how hunger is experienced afterward. In many species, feeding is not a short event. It can take a significant portion of the day, especially for those that consume plant material or must process food slowly. During this time, the body is continuously receiving signals from the mouth, the stomach, and the digestive tract, reinforcing a state of ongoing intake and gradual satisfaction. This extended interaction with food helps create a stable transition between eating and not eating, reducing sharp changes in how hunger appears. In humans, particularly in modern environments, eating is often faster and more concentrated. Meals may be completed in a short period, and the body shifts quickly from intake to post-digestion. This shorter interaction can influence how long the feeling of fullness lasts. When the act of eating is brief, the signals that come from chewing, tasting, and processing food in the early stages are also brief, and these signals play a role in how the brain interprets fullness. Research in physiology shows that sensory input during eating contributes to satiety, not only the energy content of the food. When this input is extended over time, it can support a more gradual and sustained sense of satisfaction. In early human environments, eating often required more time and effort. Food might be gathered, shared, and consumed slowly, with pauses and variation. Chewing could take longer, and the process of preparing food could extend the interaction with it even before eating began. This created a pattern where the body received continuous sensory and digestive signals over a longer period, supporting a smoother transition into fullness. The human body adapted to these conditions by integrating both the act of eating and the internal processing of food into its regulation of hunger. In contrast, when eating becomes rapid and concentrated, the body may receive a shorter burst of signals followed by a quicker decline. This can lead to a shorter duration of fullness, even if the total energy intake is sufficient. Another aspect is that animals often engage in feeding behaviors that naturally regulate the pace of intake. Grazing, foraging, and hunting can extend the time between the start and end of a feeding period, creating a rhythm that blends eating with activity. This rhythm supports a more continuous flow of signals related to food, which can reduce the need for frequent, distinct episodes of hunger. Humans, especially in structured modern settings, may separate eating from other activities, concentrating it into specific times and reducing its duration. This separation can make the transition between fullness and hunger more noticeable, as the body moves more quickly between states. In early human life, the boundary between eating and not eating may have been less defined, with food being consumed in smaller amounts across time as it was found. This pattern would have supported a more gradual change in signals, smoothing the experience of hunger. The social and environmental context also played a role, as shared activities and movement influenced when and how food was consumed. Over time, the body adapted to these patterns, maintaining sensitivity to both the duration of eating and the nature of the food. In modern environments, where meals are often brief and food is easily consumed, the same system can produce a different rhythm. Hunger may return sooner, not because the body lacks energy, but because the signals associated with eating have ended more quickly. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger is shaped not only by what is eaten, but by how eating unfolds over time. The human body integrates sensory, physical, and metabolic information, and when the duration of these inputs changes, the experience of hunger changes as well. This contributes to a pattern where hunger can appear more frequently, reflecting a system that remains responsive to both the timing and the structure of eating, shaped by long periods of human life in environments where interaction with food was extended and varied, and where the transition between eating and not eating was more gradual than it often is today. The way humans move through their daily lives also plays a quiet role in how often hunger is felt, and this role becomes clearer when we compare patterns of activity across different environments. In many animals, movement and feeding are closely linked. They travel, search, or hunt in ways that naturally space out their intake of food. Periods of activity are often followed by periods of rest, and this rhythm supports longer intervals between feeding. Energy use rises and falls in a pattern that aligns with these cycles, allowing the body to adjust without creating frequent signals to eat. In humans, especially in modern settings, this connection between movement and feeding is less direct. Physical activity can be separated from the act of finding food, and food can be obtained with little effort. This change alters how the body experiences energy use and how it responds to it. The human body still monitors energy closely, but the signals it produces are now interacting with a pattern of life that is different from the one in which they developed. In early human environments, movement was not optional. It was part of daily life, shaping when and how food was found. Walking long distances, observing the surroundings, and interacting with the landscape were essential activities. Energy was used in a steady and continuous way, and the body adapted by maintaining a balance between use and intake. Hunger signals would have been influenced by this pattern, appearing in ways that encouraged continued movement and engagement with the environment. The body did not separate the need for energy from the act of obtaining it. Instead, hunger was part of a system that guided behavior within a dynamic environment. In modern life, where movement can be reduced and food is easily accessible, this system operates under different conditions. The body continues to produce signals based on internal changes, but these signals are no longer closely tied to the effort required to obtain food. This can create a situation where hunger appears even when physical activity is low, because the signals are responding to factors such as brain energy use, digestion, and learned patterns rather than to the immediate need created by movement. Another aspect is that the human body does not fully adjust its hunger signals based on short-term changes in activity. While long-term patterns of activity can influence energy needs, the system that regulates hunger tends to remain sensitive to small changes in internal balance. This means that even on days with less movement, hunger may still appear at similar times or with similar intensity. In early human life, where activity levels were more consistent and closely tied to survival tasks, this sensitivity would have aligned more directly with actual energy use. The body would have experienced a more stable relationship between effort and intake. In contrast, modern variability in activity can create a mismatch, where hunger signals do not always reflect immediate physical demand. The environment further shapes this experience by providing constant access to food. When food is always available, the body can respond to hunger signals immediately, reinforcing the pattern of frequent intake. In early human environments, where food required effort to obtain, there may have been a delay between the signal and the response, allowing hunger to guide behavior without leading to immediate consumption. This delay could have smoothed the rhythm of hunger, integrating it with movement and search. In modern settings, the absence of this delay allows hunger to be followed quickly by eating, creating a more frequent cycle. From a broader perspective, this reflects how the human experience of hunger is influenced not only by internal biology, but also by the structure of daily life. The body continues to operate with systems that were shaped in environments where movement, effort, and food were closely connected. When those connections change, the same systems can produce a different pattern, one in which hunger appears more often because it is no longer balanced by the same relationship between activity and intake, highlighting the role of environment in shaping how often the feeling of hunger returns. When the connection between movement and food becomes less direct, another change begins to appear, and that is how the body interprets periods of rest. Because in many animals, rest is closely linked to reduced energy demand and a temporary quieting of hunger signals. During rest, the body can lower its activity, slow certain processes, and rely more on stored energy, creating a state where the need for food is less immediate. This pattern is supported by a rhythm in which activity and rest are clearly separated, allowing the body to alternate between using energy and conserving it. In humans, this separation is less complete. Even during periods of physical rest, the brain remains active, and many internal processes continue at a steady rate. This means that energy use does not decrease as much as it might in other species during rest, and the signals that monitor energy balance remain engaged. As a result, hunger can still appear even when the body is not physically active, because the system that regulates energy is not fully shifting into a low-demand state. In early human environments, rest was still an important part of daily life, but it was often connected to cycles of light, temperature, and social activity rather than to a complete reduction in internal function. Humans needed to remain aware of their surroundings even while resting, maintaining a level of alertness that supported safety and cooperation. This ongoing awareness required energy, and the body adapted by continuing to monitor and signal changes in energy availability. Hunger, in this context, was not only linked to movement, but also to the need to maintain readiness, even during quieter periods. Another aspect is that modern patterns of rest often include conditions that differ from those in early human life. Artificial light, structured schedules, and indoor environments can change how the body experiences rest and activity, influencing internal timing systems that also affect hunger. These changes are well recognized in physiology, showing that the body's rhythms can shift based on environmental cues. When these rhythms are altered, the timing of hunger signals can also change, sometimes making them appear more frequently or at unexpected times. This does not mean that the body is misfunctioning. It reflects a system that is responding to new patterns while still operating with mechanisms shaped in earlier conditions. The relationship between rest and hunger is therefore influenced by both internal processes and external factors. The body continues to use energy during rest, especially for maintaining brain function, and it continues to monitor that use. At the same time, environmental cues can shape when hunger signals appear, adding another layer to the experience. In many animals, where rest is more closely associated with reduced activity and lower energy demand, hunger can remain quiet for longer periods. In humans, where rest does not fully reduce internal activity, hunger can remain part of the background, appearing even when the body is not engaged in visible effort. The structure of modern life can further separate rest from natural environmental cues, making the rhythm of hunger less predictable and sometimes more frequent. In early human life, the alignment between rest, activity, and environment would have created a more integrated pattern, where hunger signals were shaped by a combination of internal need and external conditions. The body adapted to this integration by maintaining flexibility, allowing hunger to guide behavior across different states. In modern settings, where these elements are less connected, the same system can produce a different experience, one in which hunger appears more often because the body continues to operate with a level of internal activity and responsiveness that does not fully decrease during rest, highlighting how changes in daily patterns can influence the rhythm of hunger without changing the underlying biology that produces it. Another quiet shift appears when we look at how easily humans can respond to hunger compared to many animals, because the distance between feeling a signal and acting on it has become very small. In many species, hunger does not lead immediately to eating. There is often a gap filled with searching, waiting, or moving through the environment before food is found. During this gap, the body continues to manage energy, and hunger can rise and fall without always being resolved right away. This creates a pattern where the signal is part of a longer process, connected to effort and uncertainty. In humans, especially in modern settings, this gap is often reduced or removed. Food can be obtained quickly, sometimes with very little movement, and this changes how the body learns from the signal. When hunger is followed by immediate intake, the cycle becomes shorter and more repeated. The body begins to associate the signal with a rapid response, reinforcing the pattern of frequent eating. This does not require large changes in biology. It emerges from the interaction between existing systems and new conditions. In early human environments, the delay between hunger and eating would have been a normal part of life. Food was not always nearby, and finding it required attention, movement, and sometimes cooperation. Hunger would guide behavior, but it would not always be resolved immediately. This delay allowed the body to experience a range of internal states, including mild hunger that did not lead to immediate intake. Over time, this could create a rhythm where hunger was present, but did not always result in eating, integrating the signal with the process of searching. In modern environments where food is consistently available, the delay is often absent. Hunger can be followed by eating almost as soon as it is noticed. This shortens the cycle and can make hunger feel more frequent, not because the body needs more energy, but because the signal is quickly reinforced by action. Another aspect is how this immediate response interacts with learned patterns. When the body experiences a repeated sequence of hunger followed by eating, it can begin to anticipate that sequence, strengthening the signals that lead to it. This anticipation is part of how the brain learns from repeated behavior, and it can make hunger signals appear more regularly. In early human life, where the outcome of hunger was less predictable, this pattern would have been more variable. The body would not always expect immediate intake, and signals could remain more flexible. The environment further influences this process by providing constant cues and opportunities to eat. These cues can trigger attention and anticipation, leading to hunger signals that are quickly followed by action. Over time, this creates a system where the cycle of hunger and eating becomes closely linked and frequently repeated. In contrast, many animals experience a separation between the signal and the response, allowing their bodies to move through longer cycles without frequent reinforcement. The human system, shaped by flexibility and learning, adapts to the conditions it encounters. When those conditions include immediate access to food, the pattern of hunger becomes more frequent as the body learns to expect a rapid resolution. From a broader perspective, this reflects how the timing between signal and action can shape the experience of hunger. The body does not operate in isolation. It learns from patterns, adjusts to the environment, and integrates internal signals with external possibilities. Hunger, in this sense, is part of a cycle that includes not only the need for energy, but also the way that need is responded to. When the response becomes immediate and consistent, the cycle becomes shorter and more repeated, creating a rhythm where hunger appears more often, shaped by both the underlying biology and the structure of daily life that surrounds it. Inside the human body, the feeling of hunger is guided by a group of chemical signals that move quietly through the blood and the nervous system, helping the brain understand when energy is needed and when it is being received. These signals are often described as hormones, and they do not act alone. They work together, rising and falling in patterns that reflect both internal conditions and learned experiences. Some of these signals increase when the body has gone without food for a period of time, gently encouraging the search for energy. Others increase after eating, supporting a sense of fullness and reducing the immediate need for more intake. This system is widely studied and reflects a balance between opposing influences, creating a rhythm rather than a simple on and off state. In humans, this rhythm can be more sensitive and more easily influenced than in many animals, and this contributes to the experience of more frequent hunger. One reason for this sensitivity is that the signals respond not only to actual energy levels, but also to patterns, timing, and context. If food is eaten regularly, the signals that promote hunger can begin to rise in anticipation, even before energy levels have changed significantly. This anticipatory response is well documented and shows how the body learns from repeated behavior. In early human environments, these signals would have been shaped by conditions that were less predictable. Food was not always available at the same time or in the same amount, so the system remained flexible, adjusting based on immediate conditions rather than fixed schedules. The hormones that regulate hunger would rise and fall in response to changes in activity, availability, and internal balance, creating a pattern that was closely linked to the environment. In modern settings where food is often consistent and routines are stable, the same system can become more regular, producing signals that appear at similar times each day. This can make hunger feel more frequent, as it is influenced by both internal needs and learned timing. Another aspect is that these signals are affected by factors beyond food itself. Sleep, stress, and daily patterns can all influence how strongly hunger is felt. When sleep is reduced or irregular, the balance between signals that promote hunger and those that promote fullness can shift, making hunger more noticeable. Stress can also influence these signals, sometimes increasing attention to food or altering the way the body responds to energy changes. These effects are widely recognized in research and show that hunger is part of a broader system that responds to many aspects of daily life. In early human environments, these influences would have been present as well, but they were shaped by natural cycles and immediate conditions rather than by structured routines. The body adapted to a world where changes were gradual and linked to the environment, maintaining flexibility in how signals were produced and interpreted. In modern life, where patterns can change quickly and are influenced by artificial conditions, the same system can produce signals that feel more frequent or less predictable. The body continues to operate with mechanisms that were shaped over long periods of human history, but those mechanisms now interact with a different set of inputs. The result is a system that remains responsive and sensitive, producing hunger signals that reflect not only the body's need for energy, but also the patterns of behavior, rest, and activity that define daily life. This helps explain why humans often experience hunger more often than animals, as the signals that guide hunger are influenced by a wider range of factors and respond to both internal states and external conditions, creating a pattern that is more continuous and more easily shaped by the environment in which the body exists. The balance between signals that increase hunger and those that support fullness does not remain fixed, and this balance can shift in response to daily conditions in ways that are gradual but noticeable over time. The body is constantly adjusting, using information from recent food intake, sleep patterns, and internal rhythms to regulate how strongly these signals are expressed. When conditions are stable and aligned, the system can maintain a smoother rhythm, where hunger rises and falls in a predictable way. When conditions change even slightly, the balance can shift, making hunger appear more often or feel more persistent. This flexibility is a normal feature of the system and reflects its role in helping the body adapt to changing environments. In early human life, these adjustments would have been shaped by natural cycles and immediate conditions. Periods of activity, rest, and food availability followed patterns that were closely linked to the environment, and the body responded by adjusting signals accordingly. Hunger would increase when energy was needed or when conditions suggested that food might be available, and it would decrease when energy was being supplied or when the body was in a more stable state. The system remained responsive but not overly influenced by rapid or artificial changes. In modern environments, where daily patterns can vary and are often influenced by artificial light, structured schedules, and constant access to food, the same system can experience more frequent shifts. Sleep patterns, for example, play a significant role in regulating hunger signals. When sleep is reduced or occurs at irregular times, the signals that promote hunger can increase, while those that support fullness may become less effective. This relationship is widely supported by research and shows that the body uses sleep as an important reference for maintaining balance. When that reference is disrupted, the regulation of hunger can become less stable, leading to more frequent signals. Stress also interacts with this system, influencing both attention and internal regulation. When the body experiences stress, it can alter the way hunger signals are produced and interpreted, sometimes increasing the likelihood that food will be sought even when energy levels are not low. This effect is part of a broader response that prepares the body to cope with changing conditions, and it can influence how often hunger is felt. In early human environments, stress would have been tied to immediate challenges, such as finding food or responding to changes in the surroundings, and the body's response would have been closely linked to those situations. In modern life, where stress can be more continuous and less directly connected to physical activity, the same response can influence hunger in ways that feel more frequent or less predictable. Another factor is that the system that regulates hunger integrates multiple signals at once, and when these signals do not align, the experience can become more complex. For example, the body may have sufficient energy, but if sleep has been reduced or patterns have shifted, hunger signals may still increase. This reflects a system that is not based on a single measure, but on a combination of inputs that together shape the final experience. In early human life, these inputs would have been more closely aligned with the environment, creating a more integrated pattern. In modern settings where different aspects of life can move independently, the signals can become more frequent as the body continues to respond to each input separately. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger is not only about energy, but about how the body maintains balance across multiple systems. The signals that guide hunger are sensitive and adaptive, shaped by a long history of responding to changing conditions. When those conditions become more varied or less aligned, the same sensitivity can lead to more frequent hunger, reflecting a system that continues to adjust and respond, even when the environment no longer requires the same level of constant readiness that once supported human survival. The signals that guide hunger do not operate in isolation from one another, and the way they interact can shape how often the feeling returns, especially when the balance between them becomes less stable. The body relies on a coordinated system in which some signals encourage eating, while others help bring eating to a pause, and under steady conditions, these signals rise and fall in a way that creates a clear rhythm. When this coordination is smooth, hunger appears, is satisfied, and then quiets for a time before returning again. In humans, this coordination can be influenced by many small factors, and when those factors begin to shift, the rhythm can become shorter or less consistent, leading to more frequent experiences of hunger. This does not require a large disruption. Even subtle changes in daily patterns can alter how these signals interact. One example is how the timing of meals influences the way signals are released and received. When meals occur at regular intervals, the body begins to prepare in advance, and the signals that encourage eating can rise before food is actually needed. This anticipatory pattern is well established and shows how the body integrates experience into its regulation. If the timing of meals changes or becomes irregular, the signals may overlap or appear more often, as the body adjusts to a less predictable pattern. In early human environments, meal timing was not fixed, but it was still shaped by environmental cues that provided a kind of structure. Movement, light, and availability created patterns that the body could follow, even if they were not identical from day to day. The signals that regulate hunger would have aligned with these patterns, maintaining a balance that reflected the environment. In modern settings, where patterns can be more variable and influenced by artificial conditions, the alignment between signals can become less stable. Another important detail is how the body responds to repeated exposure to certain conditions over time. When patterns such as irregular eating, reduced sleep, or constant access to food continue for extended periods, the signals that regulate hunger can adjust to these conditions, creating a new baseline. This adjustment is part of the body's ability to adapt, but it can also lead to a state where hunger signals are more frequent than before. The system does not return immediately to a previous pattern. Instead, it gradually reshapes itself based on what it experiences most often. In early human life, where conditions were more closely tied to natural cycles and immediate needs, these adjustments would have been guided by the environment in a more consistent way. The body adapted to patterns that were relatively stable over long periods, even if daily conditions varied. In modern life, where patterns can change quickly and differ from one context to another, the system may receive mixed signals, leading to more frequent adjustments. Another layer comes from how the brain interprets these combined signals. When signals that encourage eating remain active or appear more often, the brain can give them more importance, making the feeling of hunger more noticeable. This interpretation is not separate from the physical system. It is part of how the system operates, integrating internal and external information into a single experience. In early human environments, where signals were more closely aligned with actual need and opportunity, this interpretation would have guided behavior effectively. In modern environments, where signals can arise from multiple sources at once, the same process can make hunger feel more continuous. From a broader perspective, this shows that the frequency of hunger is influenced not only by individual signals, but by how those signals work together over time. The human body is designed to adjust, to learn from patterns, and to maintain balance across changing conditions. When the patterns become more complex or less stable, the system responds by increasing its sensitivity and its frequency of signaling. Hunger, in this sense, becomes a reflection of how the body is coordinating multiple inputs, shaped by both long-term biological design and the immediate conditions of daily life, creating an experience that can feel more frequent even when the underlying need for energy has not changed in a simple way. When we step back and look across longer stretches of human life, another quiet factor begins to appear, and that is how hunger is shaped not only by the individual body, but by the structure of groups and generations over time. Humans have rarely lived in isolation. Early humans moved, gathered, and shared resources within groups, and this social structure influenced when and how food was consumed. Hunger, in this context, was not only a personal signal, but part of a shared rhythm that connected individuals to one another. Food was often distributed across members of a group, sometimes unevenly, depending on availability, effort, and need. This created patterns where eating could occur in smaller amounts across time rather than in large individual events. The body adapted to this structure by maintaining a level of readiness that supported frequent intake when possible, rather than relying on rare, large meals. In early human environments, the success of one individual could affect the entire group, and food sharing helped balance differences in access. This meant that a person might eat not only when they personally found food, but also when food was shared within the group. The timing of intake could therefore be influenced by social interaction as much as by personal need. The body responded to these conditions by remaining flexible, allowing hunger signals to guide behavior without requiring strict alignment with individual energy use. This flexibility supported cooperation, as individuals could respond to opportunities created by others, not just to their own efforts. Over time, this pattern became part of how the human system expects food to be available, contributing to a rhythm of more frequent, smaller intake. In contrast, many animals feed individually or within more rigid structures, where each individual's access to food is more directly tied to its own actions. Their feeding patterns can be more distinct, with clear periods of intake followed by longer periods without eating. The human pattern, shaped by cooperation and sharing, tends to be more continuous, with multiple opportunities for intake across time. This does not mean that early humans were constantly eating, but it suggests that the body was adapted to respond to repeated, smaller opportunities rather than to a single large event. Another aspect is how group living influences attention and anticipation. When food is shared or consumed together, cues related to eating can become more frequent, as individuals observe and respond to the behavior of others. The brain can learn from these interactions, linking hunger signals not only to internal states but also to social context. This process is widely recognized and shows how behavior can shape physiological responses. In early human life, this would have reinforced patterns where hunger and eating were connected to group activity, creating a system that was responsive to both personal need and shared experience. In modern environments, where food is often available independently but still influenced by social patterns, this layer remains active. People may feel hunger in response to shared routines, cultural practices, or the presence of others eating, even when their own energy needs are not urgent. The body continues to integrate social cues into its regulation of hunger, reflecting a long history in which survival depended on cooperation and shared access to resources. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger is not only shaped by biology and environment, but also by the structure of human relationships. The body operates within a network of interactions that influence when and how food is consumed, and these interactions can make hunger feel more frequent as they create additional opportunities and cues for intake. The human experience of hunger, therefore, reflects not only individual energy balance, but also the patterns of living within groups that have shaped human life across many generations, contributing to a rhythm of hunger that is more continuous and more responsive to multiple influences than in many other species. Over longer spans of human history, the structure of populations and generations has also influenced how hunger is experienced, not by changing the basic biology of the body, but by shaping the conditions in which that biology operates. Human groups have often included individuals of different ages, with different needs and different roles, and this variation created patterns of food use that were not uniform. Children, adults, and older individuals all participated in group life in ways that affected how food was obtained, shared, and consumed. This created a dynamic environment in which eating did not follow a single rhythm, but multiple overlapping ones. The body, in turn, adapted to this variability by maintaining flexibility in how hunger signals were produced and interpreted. In early human environments, younger individuals required frequent intake to support growth and development, while adults balanced energy use with the demands of movement and cooperation. Older individuals might have different patterns of activity and intake. Within a group, these differences meant that food-related activity could occur at many times across the day, rather than at a single shared moment. The presence of food, the act of eating, and the signals associated with it were distributed across time, creating a setting in which hunger could be triggered by observation, participation, or opportunity, rather than by a single coordinated schedule. This environment reinforced a system in which hunger remained responsive and adaptable, able to rise in different contexts without waiting for a fixed pattern. Another aspect is that human populations have always existed across changing environments and conditions, where food availability could shift from one period to another. Seasonal changes, movement across landscapes, and variations in resource distribution created a background of uncertainty that influenced how groups organized their behavior. In some periods, food might be more abundant and allow for more frequent intake, while in others it might be less available, requiring greater effort and flexibility. The body did not adapt to one single pattern but to the need to adjust continuously. Hunger signals remained sensitive so that individuals could respond quickly when conditions changed. This sensitivity supported survival across generations, allowing the human system to function in a wide range of environments. In contrast, many animals are more closely tied to specific ecological niches, where feeding patterns are more consistent and aligned with the structure of the environment. Their populations may experience variation, but their feeding strategies are often more fixed, allowing for longer periods without food or more defined cycles of intake. The human pattern, shaped by diversity in age, role, and environment, tends to be less fixed and more continuous. This continuity contributes to the experience of more frequent hunger, as the body remains ready to respond to multiple kinds of signals rather than to a single predictable pattern. The social transmission of behavior also plays a role across generations. Practices related to food, including when and how it is consumed, are learned and passed on, creating patterns that influence how hunger is experienced in each generation. These practices can reinforce certain rhythms, making hunger feel more regular or more frequent depending on the structure of daily life. In early human groups, these patterns would have been shaped by the environment and by the needs of the group, creating a flexible system that could adjust as conditions changed. In modern settings, where patterns can be more structured and consistent, the same process of transmission can strengthen regular cycles of hunger and eating. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger is influenced not only by immediate biological signals, but also by the structure of populations over time. The human body operates within a system that includes variation, adaptation, and learning across generations, and this system supports a pattern of hunger that is responsive and continuous. The feeling of hunger, therefore, reflects not only the state of the individual body, but also the long history of human life in groups where variability, cooperation, and changing conditions shaped how and when food was used, creating a rhythm that remains active even in modern environments where the original conditions are no longer the same. Across long periods of human life, the experience of hunger has also been shaped by how knowledge about food is carried forward, not only through direct experience, but through observation, imitation, and shared understanding within a group. Humans do not learn about food only by trial. They watch others, remember patterns, and build expectations that can influence how the body responds. This process, which is widely recognized in studies of human behavior, allows individuals to anticipate food-related events even before they happen, and this anticipation can interact with the body's internal signals. When a person expects that food will be available because it has been in similar situations before, the brain can begin to prepare, increasing attention and readiness in ways that resemble hunger. This does not replace biological need, but it adds another layer to how hunger is experienced. In early human environments, this shared knowledge would have been essential. Knowing where food could be found, when it might appear, and how it was obtained allowed groups to survive in changing conditions. These patterns were not fixed, but they were remembered and communicated, creating expectations that guided behavior. The body adapted to this by remaining sensitive to cues that suggested opportunity even when energy levels were still stable. Hunger, in this context, was connected not only to what was happening inside the body, but also to what had been learned from the group. This created a system where internal signals and shared knowledge worked together, supporting timely action in environments where waiting too long could reduce chances of success. Another aspect is that this process continues across generations, shaping how individuals respond to food from an early age. Children learn patterns of eating, timing, and response by observing others, and these patterns become part of how their bodies interpret hunger. The signals themselves are biological, but the way they are noticed and acted upon is influenced by learning. In early human life, this learning would have been closely tied to the environment and to the needs of the group, creating flexible patterns that could change as conditions changed. In modern environments, where food is often consistent and routines are stable, The same learning process can reinforce regular cycles of hunger and eating, making the experience more predictable but also more frequent. The brain integrates these learned patterns with internal signals, creating a combined response that reflects both biology and experience. This integration is a key feature of the human system, allowing it to adapt to a wide range of conditions. However, it also means that hunger can be influenced by expectations that are not directly linked to immediate need. For example, being in a situation where food is usually present can trigger a sense of hunger through learned association, even if the body's energy state has not changed significantly. This effect is widely observed and shows how the body responds to context as well as to internal signals. In early human environments, such associations would have been closely aligned with actual opportunities, as food-related cues often indicated real availability. In modern settings, where cues can be more frequent and less tied to necessity, the same system can lead to a more continuous experience of hunger. From a broader perspective, this shows that hunger is shaped not only by the body's need for energy, but by the way humans learn and share information about food across time. The body operates within a framework that includes memory, observation, and expectation, and these elements influence how signals are produced and interpreted. The result is a pattern of hunger that reflects both the biological systems that regulate energy and the social systems that guide behavior, creating an experience that is more frequent and more responsive to context than in many other species, shaped by a long history of living, learning, and adapting within groups. When we bring these layers together, a clearer picture begins to form, not as a single cause, but as a system shaped over long periods of time where many small influences combine into one continuous experience. The human body does not treat hunger as a simple signal that appears only when energy is low. It treats it as part of an ongoing process that connects the brain, the digestive system, the environment, and learned patterns. Each part contributes a small influence, and together they create a rhythm that is more frequent and more responsive than what is seen in many other animals. This rhythm can feel persistent, but it reflects how the system has been shaped to remain attentive and prepared. In early human environments, this design would have supported survival by encouraging action before conditions became difficult. Food was not guaranteed, and the ability to notice small changes and respond early helped maintain strength, awareness, and cooperation within groups. The body did not wait for clear signs of depletion. It operated with a margin of readiness, where hunger appeared as a gentle signal that guided behavior without requiring urgency. Over time, this approach became part of how the human system expects to function. It created a pattern where hunger is not rare, but regular, not extreme, but steady. In contrast, many animals rely on different strategies that allow longer periods between feeding. Their bodies can reduce activity more deeply, rely more fully on stored energy, or process food in ways that sustain them for longer intervals. These strategies match their environments and ways of life. The human strategy is different. It favors continuous engagement, flexible intake, and early response. This difference helps explain why humans often feel hungry more often, even when total energy needs are not higher in a simple sense. The frequency comes from how the system is organized, not only from how much energy is required. In modern environments, where food is stable and often abundant, this same system continues to operate in the same way. The signals that once guided survival in uncertain conditions now interact with routines, processed foods, and constant availability. This interaction can make hunger feel more frequent or more noticeable as the body responds to both its internal patterns and the structure of daily life. The underlying biology has not changed in a short period of time, but the conditions in which it operates have changed significantly. This creates a situation where the system's sensitivity, which once supported survival, can feel out of place. However, it is important to see this not as a failure, but as a continuation of a design that has not had time to fully adjust to new conditions. The human body remains flexible and adaptive, capable of responding to a wide range of environments, but it carries with it patterns that were shaped over much longer periods. Hunger, in this sense, is part of a larger story about how the body balances stability with change. It reflects a system that is always watching, always adjusting, and always preparing for what might come next. The feeling itself is not only about the present moment, but about a long history of responding to uncertainty with readiness. When we notice hunger, we are experiencing a signal that has been shaped by both the needs of the body and the conditions of human life across many generations. A signal that remains active because it was once useful to notice it early and often, guiding behavior in a world where waiting too long could make a difference that could not easily be undone. When this system is viewed within the conditions of modern life, the frequency of hunger can be understood as the result of familiar mechanisms operating in an unfamiliar environment, where the signals that once guided behavior are now interacting with patterns that did not exist during most of human history. The body continues to monitor energy, respond to digestion, and integrate information from the brain, but it is now doing so in a context where food is often continuously available, where meals follow regular schedules, and where daily routines can vary in ways that influence internal rhythms. These conditions can increase the number of times hunger is noticed, not because the body requires more energy in total, but because the signals that regulate hunger are being activated by multiple factors at once. This interpretation is consistent with established knowledge in physiology and behavioral science, which shows that appetite is shaped by both internal and external influences. One of the most important of these influences is consistency. When patterns of eating, sleeping, and activity are stable, the body can align its signals more closely, creating a smoother rhythm in which hunger appears and fades in a predictable way. When these patterns are less consistent, the signals can overlap or appear at unexpected times, increasing the frequency with which hunger is felt. This does not reflect a breakdown of the system, it reflects its responsiveness. The body is adjusting to what it experiences, using the same mechanisms that once helped it respond to changing environmental conditions. In early human life, these adjustments would have been guided by natural cycles and immediate needs, creating a pattern that was flexible but still connected to the environment. In modern life, where patterns can be influenced by artificial light, variable schedules, and constant access to food, the same adjustments can lead to a more continuous experience of hunger. Another factor is that the human system does not separate different influences on hunger into isolated pathways. Signals related to energy balance, timing, attention, and context are combined into a single experience. When several of these signals are active at the same time, the result can be a stronger or more frequent sense of hunger. For example, a small change in energy availability, combined with learned timing and environmental cues, can produce a noticeable signal even when none of these factors alone would be sufficient. This integration is a normal feature of the system and reflects how the body coordinates multiple inputs to guide behavior. In early human environments, these inputs would have been more closely aligned with actual opportunities and needs, making the signals more directly related to survival. In modern environments, where inputs can come from different sources at once, the same integration can increase the frequency of hunger. It is also important to recognize that the human body does not quickly remove patterns that have been learned over time. When routines are established, the signals that support them can remain active even when conditions change. This persistence allows the body to maintain stability, but it also means that hunger can continue to follow patterns that were learned under different circumstances. Over time, new patterns can form, but the process is gradual, reflecting the body's preference for continuity. From a broader perspective, this shows that the experience of hunger is shaped by an interaction between long-standing biological systems and the conditions of daily life. The body continues to operate according to principles that were established over long periods, while also adapting to new patterns that arise from modern environments. The frequency of hunger reflects this interaction, appearing more often when signals are influenced by multiple factors that are not fully aligned. This does not indicate a problem to be corrected, but a system that is working as it was designed to, maintaining sensitivity and responsiveness in a context that differs from the one in which those traits were first shaped, creating an experience of hunger that is both familiar and, at times, more frequent than might be expected when viewed only from the perspective of immediate energy need. When the feeling of hunger is observed in a quiet moment, without immediately acting on it, it begins to appear less like a simple need and more like a signal that carries a history within it. A signal shaped by the way the human body has learned to stay prepared in a world that was once uncertain and constantly changing. It does not arrive only when something is missing. It arrives as part of a system that is always watching, always adjusting, and always slightly ahead of what is happening in the present moment. This system was formed over long periods of time, when early humans moved through environments where food could not be predicted, where waiting too long could mean losing strength, and where small signals could guide important decisions. The body learned to respond early, to notice changes before they became urgent, and to remain sensitive even when energy was still available. In modern life, this same sensitivity remains, but the conditions have changed. Food is often stable, visible, and easily obtained, and the signals that once guided survival now interact with a different environment. Hunger can appear more often, not because the body is failing, but because it is still operating with the same principles, responding to timing, memory, attention, and small shifts in energy that once carried greater meaning. The feeling itself is gentle, often not urgent, but persistent enough to be noticed again and again. It becomes part of the background of experience, a quiet reminder that the body is maintaining balance rather than reacting to crisis. When we consider this, the question is no longer simply why hunger appears so often, but what that frequency reveals about how the human system is organized. It shows a body that is not built for long silence, but for continuous awareness, a body that favors readiness over waiting and adjustment over stillness. It shows a system that integrates many layers at once, from the chemistry of the blood to the patterns of daily life, from the memory of past meals to the anticipation of future ones. Each layer adds a small influence, and together they create a rhythm that is steady and recurring. In early human environments, this rhythm would have been closely aligned with the need to stay active, to search, to observe, and to cooperate within a group. Hunger would have guided behavior without overwhelming it, appearing as a signal that helped maintain direction rather than forcing immediate action. In modern environments where the need to search has been reduced, the same signal can feel more frequent because it is no longer balanced by the same patterns of effort and delay. Yet the system itself has not changed in a fundamental way. It continues to do what it was shaped to do, maintaining a level of sensitivity that allows the body to respond before imbalance becomes difficult to manage. From this perspective, hunger is not only about food. It is about how the human body relates to time, to uncertainty, and to the need to remain prepared. It is a reflection of a long history in which acting slightly early was safer than acting too late, and where the cost of ignoring small signals could not easily be reversed. The frequency of hunger is therefore not a mistake, but a continuation of this pattern, carried into a world that no longer requires the same constant readiness. When we notice hunger, we are not only noticing a present condition, but also a trace of how the body has learned to move through time, staying just ahead of its needs, guided by signals that are quiet, continuous, and shaped by a past that is still present in the way the body feels today. And if that signal remains even when the world has changed, then the question may no longer be why it appears so often, but whether it was ever meant to disappear at all.